Tonight, you'll discover a powerful secret that Buddhist monks have used for centuries to quiet the restless mind and find deep, meaningful rest. I'm going to share 10 remarkable Zen stories that have helped millions of people finally silence their racing thoughts and drift into the most peaceful sleep of their lives. Each story contains a hidden key that unlocks your mind's natural ability to let go of stress and worry. And here's what makes this different from ordinary sleep meditation. These teachings work even if you've never meditated before, even if your mind won't stop racing, even if you've tried everything else. The Buddha once said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." In the next hour, you'll discover exactly what this means and how to apply it to your own life. As we journey through tales of empty boats, wise monks, and unexpected wisdom, you'll notice something amazing happening. Your tension will begin to dissolve, your thoughts will start to slow, and you'll find yourself naturally sinking into a state of profound relaxation. So, make yourself comfortable, adjust your pillow, let your body become heavy against the bed. Take one deep breath with me now, and as you exhale, know that you've just taken the first step on a journey that's been waiting for you since the beginning of time. Let's begin with our first story. Our first story takes place by a peaceful river, where a lesson about the nature of our reactions awaits us. This is the story of the empty boat. Once, there was a man who loved to row his boat on a peaceful river. He found a great joy in drifting along the water, enjoying the calm and solitude of nature. Every evening, as the sun was setting and the world was bathed in golden light, he would take his boat out for a quiet journey. One such evening, as he paddled softly and relished the tranquility, he noticed another boat heading directly toward him. At first, he called out politely, "Be careful," but the boat didn't change course. Still, the boat continued on its collision course. Now, growing angry, the man began shouting, "Move aside. You're gonna crash into me." His peaceful evening was suddenly filled with frustration as he watched the approaching boat with mounting anxiety. Finally, as the two boats collided, he was ready to unleash his anger on the careless boater. But when he looked closely, he realized that the boat was empty. There was no one inside. It was simply drifting, carried by the current. In that moment, the man's anger dissolved instantly. He sat there, feeling foolish for yelling at an empty boat. What had changed? Not the situation, the boats had still collided. What changed was his understanding. There was no intention behind the collision, no carelessness or disrespect to fuel his anger. The Buddha once said, "You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger." This profound truth reveals itself perfectly in the empty boat story. Our anger, frustration, and resentment often arise not from the events themselves, but from the stories we create about the intentions behind those events. Why do we react this way? In Zen Buddhism, this reactivity stems from our ego clinging, our deep-seated attachment to a separate self that must be defended and validated. When someone cuts us off in traffic, our ego experiences it as a personal affront. How dare they disrespect me? The ego constructs a narrative where we are the center and others are either allies or adversaries. Consider how often throughout your day you encounter empty boats, situations where you attribute harmful intent where none exists. The driver who cuts you off might be rushing to the hospital. The co-worker who didn't acknowledge your greeting might be preoccupied with a family crisis. The friend who hasn't responded to your message might be struggling with depression. Yet, our ego mind quickly fills these empty vessels with assumptions of malice, carelessness, or disrespect. In Zen practice, we cultivate awareness of this pattern through mindfulness. By observing our thoughts without immediate identification, we can catch ourselves in the act of filling empty boats. We can notice the physical sensations of anger arising, the tightening chest, the quickening breath, the narrowing vision, and use these as bells of mindfulness, reminding us to pause and investigate. The 13th century Zen master Dogen taught that to study the Buddha way is to study the self, and to study the self is to forget the self. When we forget the self, when we let go of our ego's constant need to assert and defend, we see empty boats for what they truly are, simply events occurring in the vast river of existence, without a personal meaning or intentional slight. The Buddha taught, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. Each time we respond with anger, we suffer first and most. By recognizing the empty boats in our daily interactions, we liberate ourselves from the self-inflicted suffering. Tonight, as you reflect on your day, recall a moment when you felt slighted or offended. Can you recognize the empty boat in that situation? Can you see how your own mind filled that empty vessel with assumptions and judgments? And in that recognition, can you feel the freedom that comes from letting go? As the Buddha said, peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. The tranquility we seek is already available to us when we stop filling empty boats with the stories created by our ego mind. Now let us journey to a mountain path where a monk faces an unexpected challenge in the story of the monk and the tiger. Once upon a time, in a quiet mountain monastery nestled deep in the forest, there lived a wise and peaceful monk. Every day, he would take long walks through the surrounding woods, meditating on the beauty of nature and the teachings of the Buddha. He found great peace in the solitude of the forest, where he could connect deeply with the present moment and the world around him. One day, during his walk along a narrow mountain path, the monk suddenly heard a loud, frightening sound. A tiger's roar echoed through the trees. He froze for a moment, his heart pounding, and when he turned, he saw a large, fierce tiger charging toward him through the thick forest underbrush. The tiger's eyes were locked on him, and its powerful body moved with terrifying speed. The monk's first instinct was to run, and he did it. He sprinted down the path, his robes billowing behind him as the tiger drew closer and closer, desperate to escape. He saw a vine hanging down the side of a cliff. Without hesitation, he grabbed the vine and began to climb down, hoping to find safety below. As he descended the cliff, clinging tightly to the vine, He looked down, and his heart sank. Below him, another tiger was pacing at the bottom of the cliff, waiting for him to fall. He was trapped. There was no way up and no way down. The monk paused, dangling from the vine with one tiger above and another below. His situation seemed hopeless, but as he hung there, suspended between the two tigers, something caught his eye. Growing out of the cliffside, just within reach, was a small wild strawberry plant. On the plant was a single ripe red strawberry. In that moment, the monk stopped thinking about the tigers, his fear, and his predicament. Instead, he reached out with one hand, carefully plucked the strawberry, and put it into his mouth. He bit into the fruit, savoring its sweetness. The taste was exquisite. For that brief moment, all that existed was the joy of the strawberry's flavor, sweet, fresh, and perfect. Despite the danger surrounding him, the monk found peace in that single mindful moment. He had accepted that he couldn't change his circumstances, but he could still fully experience the present. The monk smiled, knowing that this fleeting taste of sweetness was a reminder of life's beauty, even in the most precarious of situations. The Buddha taught, do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. This teaching lies at the heart of the monk and the tiger story. It reveals a profound truth about our human condition. We spend our lives suspended between two tigers, the regrets and wounds of our past, and the fears and anxieties about our future. Why do we struggle so mightily with staying present? Zen Buddhism explains that our minds evolved primarily as survival mechanisms, constantly scanning for threats and planning for protection. This evolutionary advantage becomes a spiritual liability when it pulls us away from the only moment we ever truly have this one. Our thinking mind convinces us that happiness lies in resolving past hurts or securing future comforts, when, in reality, peace is available only in the present. Look deeply at your own experience. How much of your mental suffering comes from replaying past events you cannot change? The harsh words you wish you hadn't spoken, the opportunity you missed, the relationship that ended painfully. These are the tigers above. And how much anxiety stems from anticipating future scenarios that may never materialize. The work presentation next week, the medical test results, the financial worries. These are the tigers below. Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh taught, the present moment is filled with joy and happiness. If you are attentive, you will see it. This is the strawberry in the story, the simple, available joy that exists alongside our difficulties. It doesn't deny the reality of our challenges. It simply offers us a different relationship to them. This strawberry might be the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the sound of a child's laughter, the taste of a simple meal, the comfort of your bed, or even the miracle of your own breath. These small pleasures are always available, even in our most difficult moments, but we miss them when we're consumed by the tigers of past and future. Zen practice teaches us to cultivate what the Japanese call ichigo, ichi one time, one meeting, the recognition that each moment is a unique and unrepeated gift. When we truly understand the preciousness of this moment, we naturally want to be fully present for it, regardless of our circumstances. The Buddha said, "The secret of health for both mind and body is not to mourn for the past, worry about the future, or anticipate troubles, but to live in the present moment wisely and earnestly." This wisdom invites us to notice where our attention habitually goes. Are you constantly rehearsing past conversations or rehearsing future scenarios? Can you gently guide your awareness back to the strawberry of the present moment, the simple sensory experiences available right now, tonight, as thoughts of tomorrow's responsibilities or yesterday's regrets arise? Remember the monk and the strawberry. What small joy might you savor right now, even amid uncertainty? Perhaps it's the rhythm of your breathing, the weight of the blanket on your body, or the quiet of this moment. The Buddha taught, there is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path. By savoring the strawberries along our journey, we discover that peace is not waiting for us when the tigers disappear. It's available in their very presence. Our next story reveals a profound truth about the nature of suffering through a simple yet powerful metaphor. This is the story of the two arrows. One day, the Buddha was sitting with his disciples in a peaceful forest clearing. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the sound of birds filled the air. The Buddha often taught his disciples about the nature of suffering and the path to enlightenment. On this particular day, a troubled disciple approached him with a question. "Master," the disciple said, bowing before the Buddha, "I do not understand why we suffer so much in this life. Pain seems to follow us wherever we go. Why is this so? And how can we find peace amid so much suffering?" The Buddha gazed at the disciple with kindness and understanding. He saw the confusion and frustration in his student's eyes and knew that this was a question many of his followers pondered. "Let me explain," the Buddha said gently. "Imagine that a person is struck by an arrow." The disciples nodded, understanding that the first arrow symbolized the inevitable difficulties of life, the physical pain of illness, injury, or loss. But now, the Buddha continued, imagine that after being struck by the first arrow, the person is then struck by a second arrow. The disciples looked confused. This second arrow, the Buddha explained, does not come from outside. It is created by the mind. It is the anger, fear, frustration, or sorrow that follows the pain. This is the second arrow. The Buddha paused, letting his words sink in. "You see," he said, "while the first arrow is unavoidable, the second arrow is optional." The disciple listened intently as the Buddha explained that when we experience physical or emotional pain, the first arrow, we often make it worse by adding a second layer of suffering with our mental reactions. We become angry, resentful, or anxious, and these emotions deepen the wound. Instead of accepting the pain, we resist it, and in doing so, we increase our suffering. When we are struck by the first arrow, the Buddha continued, we must recognize it for what it is, a natural part of life. But we must also recognize the second arrow. It is the arrow we create ourselves. Through mindfulness and understanding, we can choose not to let the second arrow pierce us. "Master," the disciple asked, beginning to understand, how can we avoid the second arrow? How can we prevent our minds from adding to our suffering? The Buddha smiled. By practicing mindfulness, we can observe our thoughts and emotions without becoming attached to them. When we feel pain, we can acknowledge it without judgment. We can accept that pain is part of life, but we do not need to dwell on it or create more suffering through resistance or negative thoughts. In this way, we can stop the second arrow before it strikes. The Buddha taught pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. This simple yet profound statement captures the essence of the two arrows parable. We cannot avoid all pain in life. The first arrows will find us, but we have tremendous power over how much we suffer because of that pain. Why do we so readily shoot second arrows at ourselves? Zen Buddhism points to several aspects of our conditioned mind that create this pattern. First is our deeply ingrained habit of aversion, the mind's automatic recoiling from unpleasant experiences. When pain arises, we instinctively resist it, creating a layer of mental tension that compounds the original discomfort. Second is our tendency toward identification, the way we merge with our experiences, thinking, I am in pain, rather than there is pain being experienced. This subtle difference has profound implications. When we fully identify with pain, it becomes all-consuming, defining our entire reality. When we observe it with some space, it becomes just one aspect of a larger experience. Third is our habit of proliferation, the mind's tendency to generate endless thoughts about our experiences. A simple headache becomes a cascade of worries. What if this is serious? What if it gets worse? Why does this always happen to me? I won't be able to focus at work tomorrow. Each thought is another second arrow piercing us again and again. These mental habits operate largely unconsciously, which is why the Buddha emphasizes mindfulness as the remedy. Through mindfulness practice, we develop the capacity to see these patterns as they arise. We learn to recognize the difference between the unavoidable first arrow of pain and the optional second arrows of our mental reactions. The Buddha said, "What you think, you become what you feel. You attract what you imagine. You create." This teaching reveals the creative power of our thoughts. Each time we respond to pain with aversion, identification, and proliferation, we create suffering. Each time we meet pain with mindful awareness and acceptance, we create an opportunity for healing and growth. Consider a personal disappointment, perhaps a rejection, a failure, or a loss. The first arrow is the actual event and the natural emotional response it evokes. The second arrows might include thoughts like, "This always happens to me," globalizing, "I'll never succeed," catastrophizing, "I should have done better," self-criticism, or "This isn't fair," resistance to reality. Each of these thoughts creates additional suffering beyond the original disappointment. Zen teacher Charlotte Duco-Beck said, "Pain is not something to be avoided. It's something to be experienced without resistance." This is the heart of working skillfully with the first arrow. We don't deny pain or pretend it doesn't hurt. Instead, we bring curious, compassionate attention to the experience itself without adding the second arrows of judgment, resistance, or elaborate storytelling. The Buddha taught, if you are facing in the right direction, All you need to do is keep walking. The right direction is toward our pain, not away from it. By turning toward difficult experiences with mindfulness, we develop the capacity to be with them skillfully, without compounding them with second arrows. Tonight, as you notice sensations in your body or emotions arising in your mind, can you discern the difference between the first and second arrows? Can you meet the inevitable pains of life, physical discomfort, emotional tenderness, or mental restlessness with kind awareness rather than resistance? As the Buddha said, the way is not in the sky, the way is in the heart. The path to freedom from suffering isn't found in escaping our human experience, but in meeting it with wisdom and compassion. Now, let us explore a story that teaches us about the universal nature of loss and how understanding it can bring peace. This is the parable of the mustard seed. Once, long ago, there lived a young woman named Kisa Gotami. She was kind, compassionate, and devoted to her family. But her life took a tragic turn when her only child, a beloved son, fell ill and passed away. Overcome with grief, Kisa could not accept her son's death. She carried his lifeless body in her arms, wandering from house to house, desperately seeking someone who could bring him back to life. At each door, Kisa begged, "Please help me. My son is dead. Is there anyone who can cure him?" But everyone she approached turned her away, saying that there was nothing they could do. Her sorrow grew heavier with each step, and her heart ached more with every rejection. One day, Kisa's path led her to a wise elder who took pity on her and said, "Go to the Buddha. Perhaps he can help you." With a flicker of hope in her heart, Kisa Gotami hurried to the Buddha, who was known for his compassion and wisdom. She found him sitting calmly under a Bodhi tree, surrounded by his disciples. Falling to her knees, she placed Dr. Siddhi, their son's body before him, and pleaded, "Master, please bring my child back to life. I cannot bear this pain." The Buddha looked at her with great compassion and understanding. He could see Kisa was deeply suffering, but he also knew that she needed to learn a profound truth about life and death. He thought for a moment and then spoke softly. "I can help you, Kisa," he said. "But first, you must bring me something. Go into the village and bring me a mustard seed." Kisa's heart leapt with hope. "Yes, master, I will bring you a mustard seed," she said, her voice trembling with relief. But before she could leave, the Buddha added, "The mustard seed must come from a household that has never experienced death. If you can find such a household, bring the seed to me, and I will bring your child back to life." Kisa nodded eagerly and set off on her mission. She went to the first house in the village and knocked on the door. A kind woman answered, and Kisa explained her request. "Please, can you give me a mustard seed? But it must come from a home where no one has ever died." The woman looked at Kisa with sad eyes and said, "I'm sorry, but my husband passed away last year." Kisa thanked her and moved on to the next house. Again, she made her request, but this time the response was, "I'm sorry, but my mother passed away many years ago." House after house, Kisa Gotami knocked on doors, hoping to find one that had never known death. But at every house, she heard stories of loved ones lost. A mother, a father, a brother, a sister, a child. As the day wore on, Kisa began to realize that death was not unique to her. It was a universal experience, one that touched every family. Finally, as the sun began to set, Kisa returned to the Buddha, empty-handed but with a new understanding. She knelt before him, her heart no longer filled with desperate hope, but with acceptance. "Master," she said, "I could not find a single house that has never known death. Every family has experienced the loss of someone dear to them. Now I understand that death is a part of life, and no one can escape it." The Buddha nodded gently and replied, "Kisa, you have learned an important truth. Death is inevitable, and suffering comes to all who are attached to the things of this world. But by accepting the impermanence of life, you can find peace. Your grief was not unique. It is shared by all beings. This is the nature of existence." With these words, Kisa Gotami realized that her suffering, though intense, was not hers alone to bear. She had been blinded by her personal grief, but now she saw that all people experience loss. This new understanding allowed her to release her son's body and bury him with dignity. Finally, finding a sense of peace in the face of life's inevitable changes, the Buddha taught, "Everything that has a beginning has an ending. Make your peace with that, and all will be well." This profound teaching lies at the heart of Kisa Gotami's journey. Her story illuminates one of the most challenging yet liberating truths of existence. Nothing lasts forever, and our attempts to deny this reality only increase our suffering. Why do we resist the truth of impermanence so fiercely? Zen Buddhism points to our deep-seated craving for permanence as the root of suffering. We want the pleasant to remain pleasant, the beautiful to remain beautiful, and most of all, we want those we love to remain with us always. This craving for permanence in an impermanent world creates a fundamental tension that manifests as suffering. Like Kisa, we often respond to loss with denial. We refuse to accept what has happened and expend enormous energy trying to reverse the irreversible. This denial is a natural part of grief, but when we become stuck in it, we prevent ourselves from moving through the healing process. The Buddha didn't immediately lecture Kisa on impermanence. Instead, he gave her an experience that allowed her to discover this truth for herself, a much more powerful teaching. The Buddha said, "The root of suffering is attachment." In Kisa's case, her attachment to her son wasn't just love. It was a desperate clinging that couldn't accommodate the reality of his death. Her journey to find a mustard seed from a house untouched by death helped her recognize that attachment to permanence is futile. Every household, no matter how wealthy, happy, or blessed, had been visited by death. This universal nature of loss connects us all in what Buddhists call the fellowship of suffering. When we truly understand that loss touches everyone, our own grief, while still painful, becomes less isolating. We recognize our experience as part of the great current of human existence, rather than a unique tragedy that separates us from others. The 14th century Zen master Basui wrote, "To see the truth, leave desire behind. If you do not give up desire, you will not see the truth." Kisa's desire to bring her son back prevented her from seeing the truth of impermanence. Only when she abandoned this impossible desire could she begin to accept reality and find peace. Interestingly, the Buddha didn't try to console Kisa with promises of an afterlife or reunion with her son in another realm. Instead, he guided her toward accepting the natural order of things, that what is born will die. What comes together will eventually separate. This acceptance isn't resignation or defeat. It's alignment with reality, which is the only place healing can begin, the Buddha taught. The trouble is you think you have time. This pointed reminder of life's brevity invites us to value each moment and each relationship, knowing that nothing lasts forever, rather than making us morbid or depressed. This awareness can infuse our lives with greater appreciation and presence. In your own experience of loss, whether of a person, a relationship, a career, or even a phase of life, can you recognize the mustard seed lesson? Can you see how your suffering may be intensified by resistance to the natural flow of impermanence? The Buddha said, when you realize how perfect everything is, you will tilt your head back and laugh at the sky. This perfect imperfection includes the cycles of life and death, growth and decay, coming together and separating the very rhythm of existence itself. Tonight, as you reflect on the losses you've experienced and those you fear, remember Kisa Gotami's journey. Can you find comfort in the universality of impermanence? Can you see how accepting this truth might ease your suffering? Not by diminishing your loss, but by placing it within the vast shared experience of being human, as the Buddha taught. In the end, only three things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you. Our next story speaks to the wisdom of suspending judgment and maintaining equanimity in the face of life's constant changes. This is the story of the farmer and the horse. Once upon a time, in a small, quiet village, there lived a humble farmer. He was known by his neighbors for his hard work and calm demeanor. His farm was modest, and he had only one horse to help with all his daily tasks, from plowing the fields to carrying heavy loads. Though he didn't have much, the farmer was content with his life. One day, his horse ran away. The farmer woke up to find that his stable was empty and the horse had vanished. His neighbors, hearing the news, rushed to his house to express their sympathy. "What terrible luck," they said. "How will you manage without your horse? This must be such a misfortune." The farmer, however, remained calm. He looked at his neighbors and simply replied, "Maybe." The neighbors were puzzled by his response. How could he be so indifferent to such bad luck? They wondered. They shook their heads and returned to their homes, convinced that the farmer was in denial about his loss. A few days later, to everyone's surprise, the horse returned, but it didn't come back alone. It brought with it a group of wild horses from the mountains. Now, the farmer had not just one horse, but several. The neighbors heard the news and rushed back to the farmer's house. This time, they were full of excitement. "How wonderful," they exclaimed. "Now you have so many horses. What incredible fortune." The farmer again looked at his neighbors, smiled calmly and said, "Maybe." Once again, the neighbors were confused. Surely this was a stroke of good luck. But the farmer seemed just as indifferent as he was before. They wondered why he didn't seem more excited about his newfound wealth. A few days later, the farmer's son decided to try taming one of the wild horses. While riding the horse, he was thrown off violently and broke his leg. The injury was severe, and the son would be unable to help with the farm work for a long time. Hearing of the accident, the neighbors returned to the farmer's house once again. This time, they were filled with sympathy. "What bad luck," they said. "Your son has broken his leg, and now he cannot help you. This is truly unfortunate." As before, the farmer responded with his usual calmness. "Maybe," he said. The neighbors were now thoroughly baffled by the farmer. Every time something significant happened, whether it seemed good or bad, he gave the same nonchalant response. They couldn't understand why he wouldn't react more strongly to the events in his life. A few weeks later, the country was thrown into turmoil. A war broke out, and soldiers came to the village to draft all the young men into the army. Many of the village's sons were taken away to fight in the war. But because the farmer's son had a broken leg, he was not drafted and stayed home with his father. Once again, the neighbors visited the farmer. "How fortunate you are," they said. "Because of your son's injury, he was spared from the war. What amazing luck." And once again, the farmer replied, "Maybe the Buddha taught nothing is permanent. Everything is subject to change. Being is always becoming." This truth forms the foundation of the farmer's wisdom. His consistent response of "maybe" reflects a deep understanding that life is in constant flux, and what appears favorable or unfavorable in one moment may reveal itself to be quite different in the next. Why do we rush to judge events as good or bad? Zen Buddhism points to our mind's habitual categorization, its constant sorting of experiences into desirable or undesirable, fortunate or unfortunate. This dualistic thinking creates an emotional roller coaster. We're elated when things go well and devastated when they go poorly. But as the farmer's story shows, we never have the complete picture. We cannot see how today's misfortune might prevent tomorrow's disaster, or how today's blessing might lead to tomorrow's challenge. The concept of non-judgment in Zen Buddhism doesn't mean indifference or apathy. The farmer wasn't emotionally detached from his life. Rather, he possessed what the Buddha called equanimity, upekkha, a balanced perspective that remained steady amid life's inevitable ups and downs. He cared about his horse, his son, and his livelihood, but he didn't allow his peace of mind to be at the mercy of changing circumstances. Zen Master Zheng Zan wrote in the Xin Xin Ming, "The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. When we stop insisting that life conform to our ideas of how things should be, we find a deeper kind of freedom. We open ourselves to life's inherent wisdom, which often unfolds in ways our limited perspective cannot anticipate." The Buddha taught, "Do not overrate what you have received, nor envy others. He who envies others does not obtain peace of mind." How often do we compare our circumstances to others? concluding that we are either blessed or cursed based on these comparisons. The farmer's neighbors constantly evaluated his situation based on their own judgments of good and bad, while the farmer himself remained free from these limiting perspectives. Our modern lives are filled with opportunities to practice this maybe mindset. The promotion you didn't get that leads to a more fulfilling opportunity elsewhere. The relationship that ended painfully but created space for greater self-discovery. The illness that forced you to reassess your priorities. The financial setback that taught you resiliences. In retrospect, many of us can identify seeming misfortunes that ultimately led to growth or unexpected blessings. The 13th century poet Rumi captured this wisdom when he wrote, "What appears to be a curse may be a blessing, and what appears to be a blessing may be a curse." The farmer embodied this understanding not as an intellectual concept, but as a lived reality. His maybe wasn't passive resignation, but active wisdom. The recognition that life's full story is still unfolding. The Buddha said, "In the sky, there is no distinction of east and west." People create distinctions out of their own minds and then believe them to be true. Similarly, the distinctions of good luck and bad luck are our own mental creations. Reality itself is simply a flow of causes and conditions, neither inherently positive nor negative. Tonight, as you reflect on recent events in your life that you've labeled as good luck or bad luck, try holding them with the farmer's gentle maybe. Notice how this perspective might ease anxiety about negative situations and temper attachment to positive ones. Can you find freedom in suspending judgment about how things should be? As the Buddha taught, with our thoughts, we make the world. The farmer's maybe reminds us that we always have a choice in how we interpret our experiences, and this choice has profound implications for our peace of mind. Our next story reveals the power of non-reactivity and emotional mastery. This is the Buddha and the Angry Man. Once upon a time, while the Buddha was teaching a group of disciples in a peaceful forest, a man approached him with anger burning in his eyes. The man had heard about the Buddha's wisdom and teachings, but he felt threatened by the Buddha's influence over others. Filled with jealousy and resentment, he decided to confront the Buddha and insult him in front of his followers. As the Buddha sat calmly under the shade of a Bodhi tree, the man stormed up to him and began hurling insults. "You're nothing but a fraud," the man shouted. "Who do you think you are? You may pretend to be wise and enlightened, but you're just deceiving people." The Buddha remained completely calm and unbothered by the man's harsh words. His expression didn't change, and he didn't respond to the man's anger. Seeing the Buddha's lack of reaction only made the man angrier. He shouted even louder, "How can you just sit there acting like you're above everyone else? Do you think you're better than me? I refuse to respect someone like you." Despite the man's fury, the Buddha stayed silent and serene, simply watching him with compassion. Finally, after several minutes of shouting, the man grew exhausted. He had expected to provoke a response, but the Buddha's peaceful demeanor confused him. After catching his breath, the man demanded, "Why won't you say anything? Why won't you defend yourself? Don't you care what I think of you?" The Buddha looked at him with kindness and finally spoke, his voice soft and calm. "Tell me," the Buddha asked gently, "if someone offers you a gift and you decline to accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" The man puzzled over the question for a moment before responding. "It would still belong to the person who offered it. If I don't take it, the gift remains theirs." The Buddha nodded. "Exactly. And in the same way, if you offer me your anger and I do not accept it, then who does the anger belong to?" The man was stunned by the Buddha's words. He realized that his anger had not affected the Buddha at all. Instead, it remained his own burden to carry. The Buddha continued, "If I refuse to accept your insults and your anger, they fall back on you. You are the one who suffers from them, not me. I choose not to be troubled by your words. Instead, I choose peace." The man stood in silence, contemplating what the Buddha had said. He realized that his anger had consumed him, but it had no power over the Buddha, who remained unaffected by it. In that moment, the man understood that holding on to his anger only harmed himself, not the Buddha. Feeling ashamed, the man bowed his head. "Master, I see now that my anger has only caused me pain. How can I learn to be at peace as you are?" The Buddha smiled warmly, his compassion shining through. "Anger is like a hot coal you pick up with the intention of throwing it at someone. But in the process, you burn yourself. Let go of the coal. Let go of your anger. Instead, practice mindfulness, compassion, and understanding. Through these, you will find peace." The man, humbled by the Buddha's wisdom, thanked him and bowed deeply. From that day forward, he sought to practice the Buddha's teachings, letting go of his anger and learning to find peace within himself. The Buddha taught, "You are not punished for your anger. You are punished by your anger." This profound insight illuminates why reactive emotions cause us such suffering. When we carry anger, resentment, or hatred, we damage ourselves far more than those toward whom these emotions are directed. Every moment spent in anger is a moment lost to peace. Every thought of revenge is energy diverted from healing. Why do we cling so tightly to our anger? Zen Buddhism identifies several factors that make anger particularly difficult to release. First is our sense of righteousness, the belief that our anger is justified and therefore worth holding on to. We confuse letting go of anger with condoning the behavior that triggered it. But the Buddha's teaching challenges this assumption. We can establish clear boundaries and seek justice without poisoning ourselves with reactive emotions. Second is our deep-seated identification with our emotions. We say, "As I am angry," rather than "I am experiencing anger," making the emotion inseparable from our sense of self. When someone suggests we let go of anger, it can feel like they're asking us to let go of part of ourselves. Zen practice teaches us to create space between our awareness and our emotions, allowing us to observe them without being consumed by them. Now let us explore a story about the wisdom of impermanence and non-attachment. This is the story of the monk and the teacup. In a quiet Zen monastery nestled in the mountains, a revered monk lived a life of deep contemplation and mindfulness. His students admired him for his wisdom, calm demeanor, and the way he embraced the present moment. never disturbed by the chaos around him. Every day, the monk would sit in meditation, drink tea, and share lessons with his students. One afternoon, during their usual tea ceremony, the monk held up a simple clay teacup and gazed at it for a long moment. The cup was beautiful in its simplicity, with a soft, earthy color and a perfectly rounded shape. The students, curious about their master's silent contemplation, waited eagerly to hear what he had to say. After a few moments, the monk smiled and said, "This teacup is already broken." The students looked at one another in confusion. They could see clearly that the teacup was whole, undamaged, and perfectly intact. One of the younger students couldn't contain his curiosity any longer and spoke up. "Master, the teacup is not broken. It is perfectly fine. Why do you say it is already broken?" The monk, still smiling, placed the teacup gently on the table in front of him. "In my mind," he said softly, "this teacup is already broken. It may seem whole now, but one day, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps years from now, it will break. This is inevitable. When I understand that it is already broken, I can fully appreciate it as it is without clinging to it. I can enjoy drinking tea from it, knowing that its life is temporary." The students were silent, absorbing the weight of the monk's words. They realized that the master wasn't speaking only about the teacup. He was offering them a deeper lesson about life itself. The monk continued, "Everything in life is like this teacup. All things, no matter how beautiful or precious, are impermanent. We cannot hold on to them forever. When we understand that, we are free to enjoy life fully, without fear of losing what we have. We can appreciate each moment, each relationship, each experience, knowing that it too will pass, and when it is gone, we will not suffer because we have already accepted its impermanence." One of the older students nodded thoughtfully and asked, "Master, does this mean we should not love or care for things because they will one day be gone?" The monk shook his head gently. "No, it means the opposite. When we accept the impermanence of all things, we can love them more deeply because we are not holding on out of fear of loss. We love and appreciate them for what they are in this moment. We understand that they are part of the natural flow of life. In this way, we can live with a peaceful heart, unburdened by attachment to things that are bound to change." The Buddha taught all conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with insight, one becomes disenchanted with suffering. This profound truth lies at the heart of the teacup story and points to one of the most liberating yet challenging aspects of Zen practice, embracing impermanence, not as a philosophical concept, but as a lived reality. Why do we resist impermanence so fiercely? Zen Buddhism identifies our fundamental misunderstanding of reality as the root of this resistance. We perceive things as solid, separate, and lasting, when in fact they are fluid, interconnected, and transient. This misperception leads to what Buddhists call attachment or clinging, our desperate attempt to hold on to things that, by their very nature, cannot be held. Consider how this attachment manifests in your daily life. We become attached to possessions, fearing their loss or damage. We cling to relationships, trying to prevent them from changing. we hold on to our youth, health, and capabilities, resisting the natural process of aging. We even become attached to our ideas, opinions, and identities, defending them as if they were permanent fixtures rather than fluid constructs. The monk's declaration that the teacup is already broken offers a radically different way of relating to impermanence. Instead of denying or resisting change, he embraces it preemptively by acknowledging the inevitable end of all things. He liberates himself from the anxiety of trying to prevent the unpreventable. This isn't pessimism, but clear-eyed realism that paradoxically enhances his appreciation of the present moment. The Buddha said, "The world is afflicted by death and decay, but the wise do not grieve, having realized the nature of the world." This teaching isn't encouraging callousness or detachment from caring. Rather, it points to a different quality of caring, one not distorted by the impossible expectation of permanence. The monk doesn't love his teacup less because he knows it will break. He loves it more precisely because its existence is fleeting and precious. Zen Master Shunryu Suzuki explained this paradox beautifully. When we understand the truth of impermanence and find our composure in it, we find ourselves in jnana. This composure isn't achieved by resigning ourselves to loss, but by fully embracing the nature of reality. It's a composure that allows for deep engagement with life, precisely because we're not constantly fighting against its fundamental characteristics. In practical terms, how might we cultivate this already broken perspective? We can start by noticing our attachments, the people, things, and circumstances we most fear losing. Rather than trying to suppress this fear, we can gently acknowledge the temporary nature of these precious aspects of our lives. We can practice saying to ourselves, "This too will pass," not as a dreary reminder, but as an invitation to cherish the present moment. The Buddha taught, "All that we are is the result of what we have thought. The mind is everything. What we think, we become." This teaching reminds us that the dust of our attachments can be cleared through our awareness of the impermanent nature of all things. In your daily life, notice when you're clinging to something, whether it's an object, a relationship, or a belief. Can you gently let go of the fear of losing it? Can you see how embracing the impermanence of these things enhances their beauty and meaning? Tonight, as you prepare for rest, imagine the day's accumulated dust of thoughts, emotions, and experiences gently being wiped away, revealing the clear, reflective surface of your inherent awareness. As the Buddha said, "Look within. Thou art the Buddha." The pristine mirror of your true nature has been present all along, waiting only for the patient, loving work of clearing away what obscures it. Our next story explores the transformative power of generosity. This is the Buddha and the robot. In ancient India, during the time when the Buddha traveled across villages and towns to spread his teachings, he often attracted a large number of followers. Many of them were moved by his wisdom and left their homes to become monks and disciples under his guidance. One day, while staying in a small village, a wealthy merchant heard about the Buddha's presence and decided to visit him. He was deeply inspired by the Buddha's teachings and wanted to offer him a gift as a token of his respect. The merchant brought a beautifully woven, luxurious robe made of the finest silk, richly adorned with intricate patterns. The merchant approached the Buddha, bowed respectfully, and presented the robe with reverence. "Lord Buddha, I wish to offer you this robe as a sign of my gratitude for your teachings," he said. The Buddha looked at the robe and then at the merchant with a gentle smile. He sensed the merchant's sincerity and the desire to give. However, the Buddha lived a life of simplicity and was not interested in material wealth or luxuries. His needs were few, and he taught his followers to live in simplicity as well. "Thank you for your kind gesture," the Buddha said, "but I cannot accept this robe. It is far too extravagant for a simple monk like me. I am content with the robe I already wear." The merchant was surprised by the Buddha's response. "But, Lord Buddha, I offer this robe out of respect for you. Surely you deserve the best that I can give." The Buddha, still smiling, replied, "If you truly wish to honor me, there is another way you can use this gift. Take this robe and offer it to someone who is truly in need, someone who lacks even the basic clothing to cover themselves. That would bring greater merit and joy." The merchant, realizing the Buddha's deep compassion for the poor, nodded slowly. He understood that the true essence of giving was not about offering gifts to those who already had enough, but about providing for those in need. "Thank you, Lord Buddha," the merchant said. "I will do as you say." He took the robe and later found a poor man in the village who was shivering in the cold with only rags to wear. The merchant gave the robe to the poor man, who was overjoyed and deeply grateful. The next day, the merchant returned to the Buddha and shared what he had done. The Buddha nodded approvingly and said, "You have done well, my friend. True generosity is not in giving to those who expect or do not need, but in helping those who are in real need. By sharing your wealth with those who are less fortunate, you have brought true joy and compassion into the world." The merchant bowed deeply, feeling a warmth in his heart that he had not known before. He realized that the Buddha's wisdom extended beyond the simple act of receiving a gift. It was about understanding the true nature of giving, the importance of compassion, and the joy that comes from helping others. The Buddha taught generosity brings happiness at every stage of its expression. We experience joy in forming the intention to be generous, in the actual act of giving, and in recollecting the fact that we have given. This profound insight reveals that true generosity is not merely about the transfer of material goods, but about the transformation of our hearts and minds through the act of giving. Why did the Buddha refuse the luxurious robe? Zen Buddhism points to several layers of wisdom in his response. First, he embodied the principle of knowing what is enough, understanding that desires, when left unchecked, can never be satisfied. By being content with his simple robe, the Buddha demonstrated freedom from the endless cycle of wanting more and better. Second, the Buddha recognized that true generosity is not about social status or recognition, but about genuine need. By redirecting the merchant's gift to someone truly suffering from the cold, he taught that compassionate action should be guided by wisdom rather than convention or status. Third, the Buddha's response revealed his understanding of the merchant's motivation. The merchant wanted to gain merit and express reverence, but the Buddha showed him a more profound way to accomplish both by directly alleviating another's suffering rather than adding luxury to the Buddha's already sufficient life. In our consumer-driven culture, we often equate giving with purchasing, buying expensive gifts for people who already have enough. We measure the value of our generosity by the price tag rather than the impact. The Buddha's teaching invites us to reconsider this approach, asking us to be more mindful about where our resources can do the most good. The Buddha said, "If you knew what I know about the power of giving, you would not let a single meal pass without sharing it in some way." This points to the transformative potential of generosity, not just for the recipient, but for the giver. Each act of genuine giving weakens our self-centeredness and strengthens our connection to others. It reminds us that our well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of all beings. Zen practice encourages us to cultivate dana, paramita, the perfection of giving. This involves not just material generosity, but giving our time, attention, energy, and presence. Sometimes, the most precious gift we can offer is simply being fully present with another person, listening deeply without distraction or agenda. The story also highlights the importance of discernment in giving. The Buddha didn't suggest that the merchant keep the robe for himself or sell it for profit. He directed him to find someone in genuine need. This discernment requires us to look deeply at situations rather than following conventional patterns of giving that may not address real suffering. The Buddha taught, "The greatest gift is the act of giving itself." This points to the interior transformation that happens when we give from a place of compassion rather than obligation, social expectation, or ego gratification. When we give in this way, we experience what Buddhists call mudita, sympathetic joy in the happiness of others. Tonight, as you reflect on your own acts of giving, consider whether they align with the Buddha's teaching in the story. Are there ways you might redirect your resource, material, emotional, or attentional toward those in genuine need? Can you notice the difference in feeling between giving that comes from social obligation and giving that flows from compassion? Remember the Buddha's words, "If beings knew as I know the results of giving and sharing, they would not eat without having given, nor would the stain of selfishness overcome their minds." Let us now explore a lesser-known Zen story that reveals profound wisdom about controlling our thoughts. This is the story of the two monks and the river. Two monks, an elder and a younger disciple, were traveling together on a long journey. Their path led them through forests, over mountains, and across valleys. They walked in mindful silence for most of their journey, focusing on each step and each breath. As they approached a river, they saw a young woman standing at the edge. She was beautifully dressed in fine silks and appeared distressed. The river was swollen from recent rains, and she was afraid to cross it, fearing that the strong current would ruin her clothes and possibly put her in danger. Upon seeing the monks, she called out to them, "Please, kind sirs, could you help me cross this river? I must reach the other side." but I am afraid to wade through the water." Without hesitation, the elder monk walked over to the woman, gently lifted her in his arms, carried her across the river, and set her down safely on the other bank. The woman thanked him with a bow and continued on her way. The two monks resumed their journey in silence. As they walked, the younger monk appeared troubled. His brow was furrowed, and he kept glancing at his companion with a mixture of confusion and disapproval. After several hours of walking, the younger monk could no longer contain himself. "Master," he burst out, "as monks, we have taken vows not to touch women. How could you carry that woman across the river?" The elder monk looked at his companion with a gentle smile and replied, "I left the woman at the riverbank hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" The younger monk was struck silent by these words. He realized that while his companion had only carried the woman for a few minutes out of compassion and practical necessity, he himself had been carrying her in his mind for hours, burdening himself with judgment and disturbing his peace. The Buddha taught, "What we think, we become." This fundamental truth illuminates why the younger monk's mental burden was so much heavier than any physical weight the elder monk temporarily carried. While the elder monk responded to the immediate need with compassion and then returned to the present moment, the younger monk remained trapped in the past, replaying the scene over and over in his mind. Why do we, like the younger monk, so often carry unnecessary mental burdens? Zen Buddhism identifies several factors that contribute to this habit. First is our attachment to rules and concepts rather than principles. The younger monk was so fixated on the letter of the monastic rule that monks should not touch women that he missed its spirit, which is to live with purity and compassion. His rigid interpretation prevented him from seeing the elder monk's action as an expression of genuine Buddhist compassion. Second is our tendency toward judgment and mental proliferation. One thought leads to another, creating elaborate narratives and evaluations that pull us away from the present moment. The younger monk's initial observation led to hours of internal commentary, criticism, and confusion, all unnecessary and self-created suffering. Third is our difficulty distinguishing between skillful concern and unskillful rumination. While reflection on past actions can be valuable for learning, obsessive dwelling serves no purpose except to disturb our peace. The elder monk demonstrated the ability to act decisively when needed and then let go completely. In our daily lives, we all carry similar invisible burdens. The argument from last week that we keep rehearsing in our minds, the mistake at work that we can't stop replaying, the worries about future scenarios that may never materialize. Each of these mental patterns is like carrying a person across a river and never putting them down. The Buddha said, "Let go of the past, let go of the future, let go of the present." Crossing to the farther shore of existence with a mind released from everything, do not take up residence in birth and death. This teaching points to the freedom available when we release our mental fixations and return to the simplicity of the present moment. Zen practice offers concrete methods for putting down our mental burdens. Mindfulness meditation trains us to notice when we're carrying unnecessary thoughts and gently set them down. The practice of labeling thoughts as thinking helps us recognize them as mental constructs rather than reality. Focusing on physical sensations, the feeling of our feet touching the ground, the rhythm of our breath, anchors us in the present when thoughts try to drag us into the past or future. The elder monk embodies what Zen calls mushin, or no mind, not the absence of thought, but freedom from attachment to thought. He could think clearly when needed, act compassionately when required, and then return to the peaceful emptiness of the present moment. This state is available to all of us when we learn to put down what no longer needs to be carried. Tonight, as thoughts arise about the day behind you or the day ahead, can you notice when you're unnecessarily carrying someone or something in your mind? Can you feel the freedom that comes from gently setting down these mental burdens? Remember the Buddha's words, nothing is worth clinging to. In that release lies true peace. Let us now turn to a story that teaches about the obstacles we create in our own minds. This is the story of the empty cup. A respected university professor once visited a Zen master seeking to understand Zen wisdom. The professor had spent many years studying philosophy and religious texts and had written several books on comparative spirituality. He considered himself quite knowledgeable, but was curious about Zen's unique perspective. When he arrived at the master's simple dwelling, the old Zen master greeted him warmly and invited him to sit. "I have come to inquire about Zen," the professor began. "I would like to know what teachings you have to offer and how they differ from the many philosophies I have already studied." The master smiled and said, "Let us have tea first. Then we can talk about Zen." The professor nodded, expecting that after the customary tea, he would have the serious philosophical discussion he had traveled so far to engage in. The Zen master prepared the tea with deliberate, mindful movements. When it was ready, he placed a cup in front of the professor and began to pour. The professor, still talking, paused briefly to acknowledge the tea and continued his discourse. The master poured until the cup was full, but then continued pouring. Tea spilled over the rim, across the table, and onto the professor's clothes and the floor. "Stop!" cried the professor, jumping up. "The cup is already full. No more will go in." The Zen master stopped pouring and looked directly at the professor. "Like this cup," he said, "you are full of your own opinions, theories, and assumptions. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" The professor was stunned into silence. In that moment, he realized that his extensive knowledge had become a barrier rather than a pathway to new understanding. His cup was so full of concepts, theories, and second-hand information that there was no room for direct experience or fresh insight. Humbled, the professor bowed to the master. "I see now that I know nothing of Zen," he said. "Please teach me as if I were a beginner." The master smiled. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. Let us start with an empty cup. From that day forward, the professor approached his studies differently. Rather than accumulating more knowledge to fill his already overflowing cup, he practiced emptying it, setting aside his preconceptions, theories, and intellectual understanding to create space for direct experience and genuine wisdom. The Buddha taught, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. This teaching points to the paradoxical nature of true wisdom. It often requires us to let go of what we think we know in order to discover what is true. The professor's journey from fullness to emptiness, from intellectual knowledge to receptive awareness, embodies this fundamental shift. Why do we so readily confuse information with wisdom? Zen Buddhism identifies several patterns that lead to this common misunderstanding. First is our cultural conditioning to value intellectual knowledge above other forms of knowing. From early education, we're trained to accumulate facts, theories, and concepts, often at the expense of developing intuitive, embodied, or experiential understanding. Second is the ego's attachment to knowing. Having definite opinions and extensive knowledge can become part of our identity, a way we establish our worth and place in the world. Admitting we don't know, emptying our cup, can feel threatening to this identity, creating resistance to the very vulnerability that permits genuine learning. Third is our discomfort with emptiness itself. Western cultures, in particular, tend to view emptiness as a lack, a deficiency to be filled. In Zen, however, emptiness, sunyata, is seen as fertile space full of potential, like the empty cup that can now receive fresh tea. Zen practice cultivates this empty cup quality through various means. Meditation trains us to recognize when we're caught in concepts and to gently return to direct experience. Beginner's mind invites us to approach each situation with fresh eyes, as if encountering it for the first time, and the tradition's emphasis on direct transmission beyond words points us toward understanding that cannot be contained in intellectual knowledge alone. The Buddha said, "To know and not to act is not yet to know." This teaching highlights the difference between intellectual understanding and embodied wisdom. True knowing transforms how we live, not just how we think. Tonight, as you reflect on your own learning journey, notice when your cup might be too full to receive anything new. Perhaps you approach a conversation already knowing what the other person will say, or you read a book filtering everything through your existing beliefs. These full cup moments prevent fresh insight and genuine growth. Tonight, as you rest, create space in your mind for direct experience. Empty your cup and notice how the world appears when you do. Let us now turn to a story about finding wisdom in unexpected places. This is the story of the Zen master and the dirty road. A Zen master was traveling with a group of disciples along a countryside road. The rainy season had turned the path into a muddy, difficult journey. As they walked mindfully, paying attention to each step, they came upon a beautiful temple on a hill overlooking the road. The group decided to visit the temple and climb the hill. When they arrived, they found a magnificent structure with intricate carvings, golden statues, and meticulously maintained gardens. Inside, priests in immaculate robes conducted elaborate ceremonies with precise movements and beautiful chanting. The disciples were impressed by the temple's splendor and the priest's dedication to their rituals. After spending some time observing, they gathered around their master outside the temple. "Master," one disciple asked, "what do you think of this temple and its practices? Is this the path to enlightenment?" The Zen master didn't answer immediately. Instead, he led his disciples back down to the muddy road they had been traveling on. He stopped at a particularly dirty section, knelt down, and placed his hand in the mud. Then he drew a circle in the muddy ground. Looking at his disciples, he said, "The truth can be found here as well." The disciples were confused at first, but slowly they began to understand. The master was showing them that enlightenment was not confined to beautiful temples or perfect rituals. The mud, ordinary, messy, and commonly avoided, contained the same ultimate reality as the golden temple. True wisdom could be found anywhere by those with eyes to see. The Buddha taught, "If you cannot find the truth right where you are, where else do you expect to find it?" This profound insight lies at the heart of the Zen master's mud circle. It challenges our tendency to seek enlightenment in special places, extraordinary experiences, or perfect conditions, anywhere but the immediate reality of our lives. Why do we struggle to recognize the wisdom available in ordinary moments? Zen Buddhism points to our habitual spiritual materialism, the tendency to turn spirituality into another form of acquisition and achievement. We believe that enlightenment is found through accumulating special experiences, teachings, or credentials, rather than penetrating the reality of our everyday existence. The mud represents the aspects of life we typically try to avoid or transcend, the messy emotions, uncomfortable sensations, tedious tasks, and imperfect relationships that make up much of our human experience. We imagine that spiritual growth means rising above these muddy realities, not realizing that they themselves contain the very wisdom we seek. In Japanese aesthetics, there is a concept called wabi-sabi, which finds beauty in imperfection, impermanence, and incompleteness. The mud circle embodies this perspective, inviting us to discover profundity in what appears common or flawed. The crack in a teacup, the wrinkles on an aging face, the garden gone slightly wild. These imperfections contain their own unique wisdom and beauty when seen with clear eyes. Zen Master Dogen wrote, "If you cannot find the truth where you are, where do you expect to find it?" This echoes the Buddha's teaching and points to the mistake of externalization, looking outside ourselves for what can only be found within. The temples we build, the rituals we perform, and the texts we study are all fingers pointing to the moon, not the moon itself. In practical terms, how might we apply the wisdom of the mud circle? We can start by bringing curious attention to the ordinary moments we typically overlook. Washing dishes, waiting in line, feeling tired, experiencing conflict, rather than seeing these as obstacles to our spiritual practice. We can recognize them as the very ground of practice itself. The Buddha said, "My teaching is not a philosophy. It is the result of direct experience. This points to the experiential nature of true wisdom, not something learned intellectually, but realized through immediate contact with life itself. The mud on the road offered this direct experience in a way that observing temple rituals as a spectator could not. Tonight, as you rest, consider the mud circles in your own life, the ordinary, challenging, or uncomfortable aspects you might typically try to avoid or change. Can you bring the same attention to these experiences that you would to a beautiful sunset or a profound spiritual teaching? Can you sense the potential wisdom waiting to be discovered in these unexpected places? As the Buddha taught, all experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, created by mind. When we approach even the muddiest moments with an open, curious mind, we transform them from obstacles into pathways to deeper understanding. Let us now turn to a story about the power of letting go and the freedom it brings. This is the story of the two traveling monks, two Buddhist monks. Tanzen and Aikido were once traveling together down a muddy road in the countryside during the rainy season. Heavy rains had fallen, leaving the road flooded in many places and making their journey difficult. As they rounded a bend, they came upon a lovely young woman in a silk kimono and sash, unable to cross a large muddy puddle that blocked the path. She stood hesitating at the edge, clearly distressed about how to proceed without ruining her beautiful clothes. Without a word, Tanzen went to the woman, picked her up in his arms, carried her across the muddy water, and set her down safely on the other side. The woman thanked him with a bow and continued on her way. The two monks walked on in silence for several hours. Finally, unable to contain himself any longer, Aikido spoke out. "Brother Tanzen," he said, "we monks are not supposed to go near females, especially young and lovely ones. It is dangerous. Why did you do that?" Tanzen replied calmly, "I left the girl there, by the river. Are you still carrying her?" Aikido was stunned into silence, suddenly aware of the burden he had been carrying for hours. Not a physical woman, but the weight of judgment, concern, and mental agitation. While Tanzen had responded to a momentary need with compassion and then returned fully to the present journey, Aikido had been dwelling on the incident long after it was over. The Buddha taught, let go of the past, let go of the future, let go of the present, and cross over to the farther shore of existence. This teaching perfectly captures Tanzen's wisdom. He understood that true freedom comes not from rigid adherence to external rules, but from maintaining internal freedom, the ability to respond appropriately to each situation, and then move on without lingering attachment. Why do we, like Aikido, so often carry unnecessary mental burdens? Zen Buddhism identifies several factors that keep us clinging to what we should release. First is our tendency toward rumination, repeatedly thinking about past events we cannot change. This mental habit consumes energy that could be directed toward the present moment and often reinforces negative emotions like anger, guilt, or anxiety. Second is our attachment to rules over principles. Aikido was so focused on the letter of the monastic rule, avoiding contact with women, that he missed its spirit, which is cultivating purity of mind and intention. Tanzen, by contrast, understood that compassion sometimes requires breaking conventions, and true purity lies in the absence of selfish desire, not in rigid rule following. Third is what Buddhists call papanka mental proliferation or elaboration. One thought leads to another and another, creating complex narratives that exist only in our minds. Akido's initial observation led to hours of internal commentary about propriety, risk, and his companion's behavior, all unnecessary and self-created suffering. Zen practice trains us to recognize when we're carrying something that could be put down. Through meditation, we develop the capacity to observe our thoughts without being carried away by them. We learn to distinguish between helpful reflection and unhelpful rumination, and we cultivate the ability to return again and again to the simplicity and freedom of the present moment. The Buddha said, "In the end, only three things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you." This teaching invites us to consider what we might be carrying that no longer serves us: resentments from past injuries, anxiety about future uncertainties, or judgments about ourselves and others. In Japanese Zen, there is a concept called seishin, which literally means touching the mind-heart. During intensive meditation retreats, practitioners have the opportunity to notice what they've been unnecessarily carrying and experience the lightness that comes from setting these burdens down. This letting go isn't about forgetting or denying our experiences, but about preventing them from becoming obstacles to living fully in the present. In your daily life, notice when you're carrying something long after the actual event has ended. Perhaps you replay a conversation, worry about a mistake, or nurture a grievance. Can you, like Tanzan, respond appropriately to what each moment requires and then return to the present without residue? The Buddha taught, happiness never decreases by being shared. Similarly, our peace of mind never decreases by letting go of what no longer needs to be carried. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, experiment with setting down whatever mental burdens you've been carrying throughout the day. Imagine placing each concern, each unresolved situation, each judgment or worry gently on the ground beside you. They will still be there in the morning if you need to pick them up again. But for now, feel the lightness and spaciousness that comes from traveling unburdened, even if just for the night. Let us now explore a story about the power of inner silence. This is the story of the cricket in the temple. In a bustling Japanese city, a magnificent temple stood for centuries, its golden roof gleaming in the sun. Despite being surrounded by the noise of modern life traffic, construction, and crowds of tourists within its walls, a sense of profound peace prevailed. One day, a young musician visited the temple. Having studied both music and meditation, he was curious about the quality of silence that seemed to permeate the sacred space. As he sat quietly in a corner of the main hall, he closed his eyes and focused on his hearing, trying to understand what made this silence so special. To his surprise, beneath the occasional footsteps of visitors and the distant city noise, he detected a subtle rhythmic sound, so faint it was almost imperceptible. Curious, he followed the sound to its source and discovered a tiny cricket living in a small crack in one of the ancient wooden pillars. The musician was amazed. How could such a tiny creature be heard in this vast space? He approached an elderly monk who was sweeping the temple floor and asked, "Venerable one, have you noticed there's a cricket living in that pillar?" The old monk smiled. You've heard our little friend. He has lived in the temple for many years. But how is it possible that such a tiny sound can be heard in this large temple? With all the noise from the city outside, the musician asked. The monk put down his broom and gestured for the young man to follow him. He led the musician to the entrance of the temple and reached into his robe, pulling out a single coin. "Watch," he said. He dropped the coin onto the stone floor. At the sound of the coin falling, nearly every visitor in the crowded temple turned their heads to look. The monk turned to the puzzled musician. "People hear what they are listening for," he said gently. "The coin is no louder than the cricket, but everyone notices it because money speaks a language all are trained to hear." He continued, "Those who quiet their inner noise can hear what others miss, not just crickets, but the whispers of wisdom that speak constantly beneath the clamor of everyday life. True silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of attention." The young musician bowed deeply, understanding that he had received a teaching far more valuable than any musical technique. He had been shown the difference between hearing and listening, between external quiet and true inner silence. The Buddha taught, "He who is patient is the greatest warrior." This teaching relates profoundly to our capacity for inner silence. The greatest battles are often fought not against external enemies, but against our own internal noise, the constant chatter of thoughts, judgments, desires, and fears that drown out the subtle wisdom available in each moment. Why do we struggle to hear the crickets in our lives? Zen Buddhism points to several factors that create inner noise. First is our conditioning to value certain inputs over others. Just as everyone noticed the falling coin, but few heard the cricket, we're trained to pay attention to dramatic events, loud voices, and urgent demands, while overlooking subtle experiences that might contain deeper truth. Second is what Zen calls monkey mind, the restless, agitated quality of consciousness that jumps constantly from thought to thought, rarely settling long enough to perceive what lies beneath surface appearances. This internal chatter creates a veil between us and direct experience, filtering reality through layers of concept and commentary. Third is our diminished capacity for wonder and presence. Children naturally notice crickets, ants, cloud patterns, and other subtle phenomena because they haven't yet learned to dismiss the seemingly insignificant. As adults, we often lose this capacity for direct, unfiltered perception, missing the extraordinary that hides within the ordinary. Zen practice cultivates what might be called active silence, not the absence of thought, but a quality of alert receptivity that allows us to perceive beyond our habitual patterns. Through meditation, we train ourselves to notice when we're caught in internal monologue and gently return to simple presence. This is not about suppressing thoughts, but about developing the capacity to hear what exists beneath and between them. The Buddha said, "All that we are is the result of what we have thought. The mind is everything. What we think, we become. When our minds are filled with constant noise, we become noisy ourselves, distracted, fragmented, and unable to access the deeper wisdom available in silence." In Japanese aesthetics, there is a concept called ma, the meaningful pause, or empty space that gives form to the whole. In music, it's the silence between notes that creates rhythm. In conversation, it's the attentive pause that allows for deeper understanding. In life itself, it's the quiet moments of receptivity that often contain the most profound insights. The cricket in the temple represents all the subtle voices of wisdom, speaking constantly beneath the surface of our awareness, the intuitions we ignore, the natural rhythms we override, the quiet warnings we dismiss, and the gentle beauty we overlook. When we cultivate inner silence, these voices become audible, offering guidance and insight unavailable to the noisy mind. Tonight, as you rest in the quiet of this moment, can you listen beyond your thoughts to the subtle crickets in your awareness? Perhaps you'll notice the rhythm of your breathing, sensations in your body you typically overlook, or intuitive wisdom about a situation in your life. As the Buddha taught, the quieter you become, the more you can hear. In cultivating this inner silence, we discover that the wisdom we seek has been speaking to us all along. We simply haven't been still enough to hear it. Now, let us turn to a story about clearing away the obstacles to our true nature. This is the story of polishing the mirror. A young monk approached his Zen master after years of dedicated practice. Despite his sincere efforts in meditation and study, he felt that enlightenment remained elusive. "Master," he asked, frustration evident in his voice, "I have been practicing diligently for 7 years now. I follow all the precepts. I meditate faithfully every day. I study the sutras with dedication. Yet, I feel no closer to enlightenment than when I began. What am I doing wrong?" The old master looked at the monk with compassion. Instead of answering directly, he led the young man to a storage room at the back of the monastery. There, covered in dust and hidden behind piles of scrolls and ceremonial implements, sat an ancient mirror, once beautiful and reflective. Its surface was now completely obscured by years of dust, grime, and oxidation. "Do you see this mirror?" the master asked. "Yes," replied the monk, somewhat confused by the apparently irrelevant question. "Was this mirror created by the dust that covers it?" the master asked. The monk frowned. "No, of course not. The mirror exists independent of the dust. The dust merely covers what is already there. And if someone wished to see their reflection in this mirror, what would they need to do?" The master continued. "They would need to clean it, to remove the dust and polish the surface," the monk answered, beginning to sense where the teaching was leading. The master nodded and handed the young monk a soft cloth. "Please clean this mirror." Day after day, the monk worked on cleaning the ancient mirror. The accumulated grime of decades didn't yield easily. He tried different methods: water, oil, fine ash, special polishing compounds. Gradually, with patient, persistent effort, the mirror's surface began to emerge. After many weeks of dedicated work, the mirror was completely restored, its surface now gleaming and perfectly reflective. When the work was complete, the master came to inspect it. Looking at the brilliantly polished mirror, he asked, "Did your efforts create the mirror's reflective nature?" "No," the monk replied. "The mirror always possessed the ability to reflect. My cleaning simply removed what was obscuring this inherent quality. So it is with your Buddha nature," the master explained gently. "Enlightenment is not something you achieve or create through your practice. Your true nature, clear, luminous, and perfectly reflective of reality, has been present from the beginning. Your practice is not about adding something that's missing, but removing the obscurations that hide what has always been there." The master continued, "The dust represents your attachments, aversions, and delusions, all the mental patterns that cloud your inherent clarity. Meditation, precepts, and study are like the cloth you use to polish the mirror. They don't create enlightenment. They reveal what has always been your original face." With this understanding, the young monk's approach to practice transformed completely. Rather than striving to attain some idealized state, he now understood his work as a process of recognition and removal, recognizing the dust of conditioning as it appeared and gently cleaning it away to allow his inherent Buddha nature to shine forth naturally. The Buddha taught, "The mind is everything. What you think, you become." This teaching points to the powerful way our thoughts and mental patterns can either obscure or reveal our true nature, like dust on a mirror. Our conditioned patterns of thinking and perceiving cover the clear awareness that is our birthright. Why does the dust accumulate so persistently? Zen Buddhism identifies several factors that contribute to this obscuration. First is what Buddhists call ignorance avidya, not a lack of intelligence, but a fundamental misunderstanding of our true nature. This basic confusion leads us to identify with the dust rather than the mirror beneath it. Second is our habitual self-reinforcing patterns. Each thought of separation, each emotional reaction, each act based on a limited self-concept adds another layer of dust to the mirror. These patterns build upon each other, creating what seems like an impenetrable coating over our natural clarity. Third is our cultural conditioning, which often emphasizes achievement, acquisition, and improvement rather than recognition, clearing, and allowing. We're taught that we must add something to ourselves to be complete, rather than removing what obscures our inherent completeness. The Japanese term sesshin literally means touching the mind-heart, which beautifully captures the practice of removing dust from the mirror. In touching our mind-heart directly, we contact what has always been present beneath the obscurations, our Buddha nature, our original face before our parents were born. Zen practice is fundamentally a cleaning process. Meditation trains us to recognize thoughts, emotions, and sensations as they arise, without being carried away by them. Ethical precepts help us avoid creating more dust through harmful actions. Wisdom teachings point us back to our true nature, encouraging us to look beneath the surface of appearance to the clear mirror that reflects it all. The Buddha said, "What we are today comes from our thoughts of yesterday, and our present thoughts build our life of tomorrow. Our life is the creation of our mind." This teaching reminds us that the dust is not permanent. It can be cleaned away through aware attention to our present thoughts and actions. In your daily life, notice when the mirror of your awareness becomes clouded by stress, worry, judgment, or reactivity. Rather than fighting against these states or being consumed by them, can you recognize them as temporary dust on your inherent clarity? The Buddha taught, "Nothing is permanent. Everything is subject to change. Being is always becoming." This impermanence applies not only to external conditions, but to our internal states as well, including the dust that seems to obscure our clear nature. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, imagine the day's accumulated dust of thoughts, emotions, and experiences gently being wiped away, revealing the clear, reflective surface of your inherent awareness. As the Buddha said, "Look within, thou art the Buddha." The pristine mirror of your true nature has been present all along, waiting only for the patient, loving work of clearing away what obscures it. Let us now explore a story about simplicity and the direct path to understanding. This is the story of pointing at the moon. One evening, a Zen master was walking with his disciple under a brilliant full moon. The night was clear, and the moonlight illuminated the garden path, creating patterns of silver light and deep shadow. As they walked in companionable silence, the master noticed that the disciple was troubled, his brow furrowed in concentration. "What troubles you?" asked the master. "Master," replied the disciple, "I have been studying the sutras diligently, but the more I read, the more confused I become. One text seems to contradict another. Some emphasize rigorous practice, others sudden enlightenment. Some focus on compassion, others on wisdom. I can't unify all these teachings into a coherent understanding." The master listened attentively, then suddenly stopped walking and pointed to the full moon hanging in the night sky. "Look," he said simply. The disciple looked up at the moon, its perfect circle glowing against the darkness. "Tell me," said the master, "are you looking at my finger or at the moon?" "At the moon." "Of course," replied the disciple, somewhat confused by the question. "And did you need to analyze or study my finger in order to see the moon?" asked the master. "No," said the disciple. "The finger merely pointed the way." The master nodded. "The sutras, the teachings, the methods, they are all fingers pointing at the moon. They are not the moon itself. They direct us toward direct experience of reality. But they are not that reality. If you focus too much on the finger analyzing it, comparing it to other fingers, debating its merits, you may entirely miss what it's pointing toward." The master continued walking and, after a few steps, added, "The teachings may seem contradictory because they are addressing different people with different needs or describing different aspects of the same reality, like many fingers pointing at the same moon from different angles. But the moon itself is not divided or contradictory when you look directly at it. There is only moonlight, perfectly unified and complete. The disciple fell silent, contemplating this teaching. As they continued their walk, he found himself less preoccupied with intellectual understanding and more present with the direct experience of moonlight, the sound of crickets, and the feeling of the evening breeze. For the first time, he understood that the path to wisdom lay not in accumulating concepts, but in opening to the direct experience that the concepts were merely pointing toward. The Buddha taught, "My teaching is like a finger pointing to the moon. Do not mistake the finger for the moon." This profound instruction warns against the human tendency to become attached to spiritual teachings rather than allowing them to guide us toward direct experience of reality. Why do we so readily confuse the finger for the moon? Then, Buddhism identifies several factors that lead to this common confusion. First is our deeply ingrained habit of conceptual thinking. From early childhood, we are trained to understand the world through concepts, categories, and abstractions. This conceptual overlay becomes so pervasive that we often mistake our mental maps for the territory they represent. Second is our cultural conditioning toward knowledge acquisition rather than experiential wisdom. Particularly in educational systems, we're rewarded for gathering and organizing information rather than for direct insight or embodied understanding. This conditioning carries over into spiritual practice, where we may unconsciously approach enlightenment as another form of knowledge to acquire. Third is the comfort of the known versus the uncertainty of direct experience. Concepts, theories, and doctrines provide a sense of security and control. They can be grasped, organized, and possessed by the mind. Direct experience, by contrast, often brings us face to face with the vast unknown, the groundless ground of being that transcends our conceptual frameworks. The Japanese term shikantaza means just sitting and represents the essence of Zen's direct approach. Rather than engaging with concepts about reality, we simply sit, allowing direct experience to reveal itself without interference from our categorizing mind. This practice embodies the spirit of looking at the moon rather than analyzing the finger. In Zen, even teachings about non-attachment to teachings can become a finger mistaken for the moon. This is why Zen often employs paradox, silence, or unexpected actions to disrupt our conceptual thinking and point directly to experience beyond words. The master who holds up a flower, the teacher who gives a shout, the sudden sound of a stick striking the floor, these all serve to jolt us out of conceptual understanding and into direct perception. The Buddha said, "If you light a lamp for someone else, it will also brighten your path." This teaching reminds us that the finger of doctrine exists to illuminate our way, not to become an object of attachment. When we use teachings appropriately as guides rather than goals, they naturally lead us toward the clarity they were designed to reveal. In your own spiritual or personal development journey, notice when you might be focusing more on fingers than moons. Perhaps you find yourself debating theoretical aspects of a teaching while missing its practical application, or collecting spiritual concepts and insights without allowing them to transform your direct lived experience. Or maybe you've been comparing different paths paths and methods rather than walking the one before you with full presence. Tonight, as you rest in awareness, can you let go of all concepts about relaxation, sleep, or even these stories you're hearing? Can you move beyond the fingers of instruction to the moon of direct experience? As the Buddha taught, whatever you are doing, be aware of it. This simple pointing is all we need if we look where it's directing us, rather than fixating on the pointer itself. Let us now turn to a story about our relationship with challenges and obstacles. This is the story of the farmer's horse. In a small village nestled among rolling hills, there lived an old farmer who was known for his equanimity no matter what happened, good or bad. He maintained the same peaceful demeanor and often responded to news with a simple phrase, "We'll see." One day, the farmer's only horse, essential for plowing his fields and transporting his crops to market, broke through the fence and ran away. When neighbors heard about this misfortune, they gathered at his home to offer sympathy. "What terrible luck!" they exclaimed. "Your only horse is gone. How will you manage the farm now? This is such a tragedy." The old farmer listened to their concerns and simply replied, "Maybe." A week later, the farmer's horse returned, but it didn't come alone. It brought with it a herd of wild horses. Now the farmer, who had owned just one horse, suddenly had a dozen magnificent animals in his corral. When the neighbors heard this news, they rushed back to the farmer's home. This time, they congratulated him on his extraordinary good fortune. "What amazing luck," they declared. "Now you have many strong horses. You'll be the richest farmer in the village." The farmer thanked them for their enthusiasm, but again responded, "Maybe." The following day, the farmer's only son began the work of training these wild horses. While attempting to break one particularly spirited stallion, he was thrown to the ground and broke his leg badly. The neighbors once again gathered, now offering condolences for this stroke of bad luck. "How unfortunate," they said. "Your son is injured and cannot help with the farm work. With the harvest coming, this is surely a disaster." As before, the old farmer acknowledged their concern and replied, "Maybe." Within a week, military officials came to the village, conscripting all able-bodied young men to fight in a war that had just been declared against a neighboring kingdom. It was a dangerous conflict, and everyone knew that many of those taken would never return. But because the farmer's son had a broken leg, he was passed over and allowed to remain home. The neighbors, whose sons had been taken away, came to the farmer in tears, expressing both their sorrow for themselves and their admiration for what now appeared to be the farmer's incredible good luck. The farmer listened compassionately to their mixed emotions and once again said simply, "Maybe." The Buddha taught, "Do not judge by appearances. Find the truth behind all form." This wisdom is perfectly embodied in the farmer's story. His consistent response of "maybe" reflects a profound understanding that no event can be fully judged in isolation. Its meaning and impact continue to unfold within a complex web of causes and conditions. Why do we rush to categorize experiences as fortunate or unfortunate? Zen Buddhism points to our mind's habitual dualistic thinking, its tendency to sort all experiences into binary categories of right-wrongs, true-false, or superior-inferior. This either-or framework fails to honor the plurality of effective approaches to awakening. Tonight, as you reflect on recent events in your life that you've labeled as good luck or bad luck, try holding them with the farmer's gentle maybe. Notice how this perspective might ease anxiety about negative situations and temper attachment to positive ones. As the Buddha taught, with our thoughts, we make the world. The farmer's maybe reminds us that we always have a choice in how we interpret our experiences, and this choice has profound implications for our peace of mind. As we've seen, the story of the mirror teaches us a profound lesson. Enlightenment is not something we achieve by adding to ourselves, but something we recognize by removing the layers of dust that cover our minds. It's the dust of anxiety, fear, and mistaken concepts about ourselves that prevent us from seeing clearly. But if we realize that these layers are temporary, we can begin to gently let them go. When the mirror of our mind is polished and clear, we'll discover that enlightenment has always been right there, within us all along, waiting to be revealed. Just like a mirror doesn't create its reflection, we don't need to create enlightenment. We simply need to remove the distractions and allow our true nature to shine through. So, we've gone through the journey of a Zen monk, from seeking the truth through layers of thoughts to realizing that enlightenment isn't an end point, but a recognition and letting go. Just like the mirror, our true nature is always available, but it's covered by layers of clutter that we've accumulated over time. The practice of Zen, whether through meditation, mindfulness, or just living with awareness, helps us clean away that clutter. Just as a mirror only reflects the truth once it's cleaned, our minds only reflect clarity when we let go of the unnecessary. In our daily lives, we may find ourselves tangled in worries, judgments, or desires that we cling to, believing they are necessary. But remember, these are just layers of dust. True peace and clarity come from seeing things as they are and letting go of what no longer serves us. You don't need to make things complicated to achieve enlightenment. Sometimes it's about slowing down, being in the present moment, and embracing the simplicity of just being. If you found value in this story, don't forget to hit like, share with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more content that helps you find peace in the chaos of life. Thank you for watching, and remember, live each day with a clear mind and an open heart. May you find peace in the simplest moments of life. See you in the next video.